Think Like a Filmmaker has become a staple of my roadshow, just so that you know. I take that film all over the country and use it as an example of what good documentary filmmaking can be, and also what achievable filmmaking can be. You know, the singular focus of one person and one specific aspect of that person's life is a really achievable focus point for emerging filmmakers. And of course, you do it at the highest level. And you're interviewing your dad, which is so cool. I mean, I have two sons. I can't imagine like them sort of taking a look at something that I do and diving in. Can you tell me a little bit about that process and what it was like, not just making the documentary, but also working with a family member?
Yeah, that was a very fun process. It was, yeah, okay. So I basically, after school, I'd go into the basement and see my dad in his little like studio.
I'm super jealous of his little setup. I mean, like he is the coolest artist. Yeah,
no, it was crazy. And he was like doing these beautiful artworks. And I was like, okay, I want to make a film about this. It's COVID again, right?
Okay.
It's the lockdown. I want to explore this. And I interviewed him first for around like 4 hours. Like it was a very intense interview. It was a very intense interview. It was really fun, but it was, there was a lot of like back and forth, and I put some of that in the film. And I think working with him, he originally, like in the Moses film, he helped me a lot with that. And I'm very fortunate, and I feel like it's a privilege to have a dad who's like also a filmmaker. But at some point, I think right before high school, I sort of cut him off from my filmmaking. If that makes sense.
I see that. Mm-hmm.
So I said to myself, he is such like a creative force that it was sort of hard to work with him. And many times, so I said, he can see my films, but after they're done. And with this film, he sort of saw me working in the process, he's never like seen that before. So I think that was an interesting thing. And it was also his reaction when I showed it to him. I can get into that after. But basically, I interviewed him for 5 hours. I went around his studio, took B-roll, but that was a film that was constantly being updated too, because his work was constantly changing.
Okay.
So I had to go back, like a week later, this thing that was only a little bit is now something totally different, and I have to refilm that. But it was fun. It was also sometimes annoying working with him. But I guess that's just father and son stuff.
Did you have a plan? Like when you were making it?
Yeah.
Was there a plan? Like, I'm going to do a micro macro. I'm going to show the little pieces to reveal the whole, or what was your goal? I know obviously to present the artist, right? But I would love to know, because I do use this film as a teaching tool. What was your plan?
If I'm going to be totally honest, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just getting this footage. And I think when I was editing it, it became clear what I wanted to do. And then I would go back and film based on what I was editing. I'd be like, okay, I have this sort of like discovery here of like my dad. Okay, I'm only saying that my dad is my dad at the end of the film. So I need more like impersonal shots at the beginning and then get into like more. So I like would refilm things specific, or I'd be like, I need this shot of his, like a wide shot of his studio here. And then I would like go and film that. I think that was partially because I was lucky that I was like editing in like a room next to where he was doing his stuff. So I could always just go hop in there anytime. But I really, when I was filming it, I did not know how it was. And I think that's okay. And that sort of freed me a little bit from the constraint of needing to like get this or get that. Like I was able to sort of work just like freely and just like go around and film stuff the way I wanted to do it. And then I think editing for that film was a real challenge because I had 5 hours of interview footage and I had a lot of like B-roll around the studio, and I had to make that into something
in 6 minutes. Ultimately,
it ultimately went to 6 minutes, which was really hard. And I first had to like organize all the footage, which was also really hard because he talked for 5 hours. I made like sub clips of everything, which took probably as much time as like editing it itself. But I had so many different cuts of that film. It's like probably like 30 different versions of that one film, maybe even more. And I think I sort of discovered that it was really important that film needed an arc. It needed to change somehow. Because I think with documentaries, if you're just like on the same level the whole time, it can get sort of stagnant.
Yeah.
And feel like talking head. So I needed some type of arc to it. It needed to be different at the beginning than it was at the end. So I had a cut where I like established that he was my dad at the very beginning. And then once I moved that like 3/4 into the film, it like totally changed and totally made it better. And I think that was partially because I was just like playing around with it. And I think it's really important, especially while editing, to just like try things, make a new sequence, you know, move stuff around, figure out how it's going. But I think with that, I really needed an arc to sort of make that film work. And then it sort of came into this thing where it started sort of in the impersonal of it and then got to like the personal. Like at the beginning, you might not know that it's like my dad exactly. It's just like a portrait of an artist. And then it turns into a more like intimate type of film, which I needed the time editing that to sort of realize that.
And I think another thing that really makes it work is just how casual it is. And that's probably, again, because it's your dad, but like the way that you communicate with each other, the questions that you ask, the responses, they're very comforting. There's no pretension. It's all very raw. And it's very welcoming to the viewer. And you become more and more curious about the subject because of this feeling you get of the relationship. And then anyone who doesn't know, when you do drop the knowledge that it is your father, it all sort of, comes full circle. And it's again, it's very comforting in a way. The shots in the film, they're incredibly artistic, like all of your work. Like you just get it. Like you have an eye. Is it, you stumble upon it? How much are you planning? How much is just shooting a ton and taking the best stuff? I'm curious about that.
For Think Like a Filmmaker, it was really shooting a ton and picking the best stuff. But I don't know, I tried to be like careful with my frames to sort of like make sure they weren't, like I'm very picky with my frames sometimes. The DP I worked with just last weekend probably.
He's aware of it?
Yeah. Or even on some of my films. I think with my narrative films, it's interesting when I like think of the difference, because with my narrative films, I have so much pre-production going into each one. And with these films, I have, with like this documentary, I had like almost no pre-production going into it. And I think, I don't know, I'm trying to like find the middle ground right now. But yeah,